could it be that there is more of a connection on how animals interact with the plant world? And I knew I had to become a black jaguar. Am I supposed to speak to this now? There's a hair. Is this okay like that? I like the colors. All right, well, let's go. Hola, my name is Rosa. I'm a National Geographic explorer, UNESCO awarded Indigenous scientist, founder of Amazon Research Internacional, and author of The Spirit of the Rainforest. And this is the only place on the internet where I will share raw, unfiltered opinions on our modern scientific world and the traditional knowledge of our ancestors. So come explore with me. Today we will talk about ayahuasca. Ayahuasca. What is it? What do people use it for traditionally and in current times? How do people train to be ayahuasqueros or shamans? What is the science behind? What are some of my personal wildest experiences with it? Let's dive in. Ayahuasca, traditionally across the Amazon rainforest, it's considered a teacher plant, a union between mind, body, and spirit. Historically, our own communities have used ayahuasca to heal, to access new realms between the physical human world, the animal and the plant worlds. And currently, in modern times, ayahuasca is also being explored clinically as a potential treatment against PTSD, depression, and a few others across various countries. The people who are the masters that have trained to administer these teacher plans and conduct and really master the ceremonies are known as shamans. Other traditional names are ayahuasquero, from the name ayahuasca, or even sheripiari, for example, in the Shamanic cultures. Multiple indigenous groups across the Amazon use ayahuasca as a powerful teacher plant, from Shipibos, Ashaninka, Achuar, Shuar, amongst many, many others. And not just anyone can become a shaman that can handle and control this powerful teacher medicine. There are a few people within communities that are born and as they are growing into adulthood feel a very strong calling to learn more about this plant medicine and to dive deep into its teachings. And the process is not from one day to the other. Oh, I decide that I want to be an ayahuasca shaman, and now the next day I can go ahead and lead retreats and groups. Not at all. It's actually such an in-depth process that I like to think it has an incredible parallelism to how we train for universities in the Western world. To give you an example, some of my dear friends that are traditional shamans for ayahuasca treatments have trained for over 12 years. it is a very long and very in-depth process that they pursue, because this teacher plant is considered a very powerful medicine that you need to approach with respect, and you also do need to learn how to control. And so across those 12 years or so of training, they have to be under the mentorship of a powerful, experienced shaman, learning constantly, doing different sessions, unraveling what these sessions mean. Because in the sense, compared to the Western educational systems, where we have a teacher sharing information to us, we digest that information, and then so we move on. With ayahuasca, some of the knowledge gets transmitted that way, but the majority of it, it's meant to come from the plant itself. So it is a very inward, in-depth process. I have had incredible shaman friends who have also shared that as part of their training, they feel compelled to take on the ayahuasca medicine and go hike by themselves at 2 a.m. in the middle of the pitch black forests, so that they can become one with the forests and they can really absorb as much as they can from the surroundings. Of course, you then run into the potential dangers that come with a forest at night. But that is the unique power of ayahuasca. Each person in training has their own journey, and they also have to give up a lot. While you're doing ayahuasca, your body is meant to be cleansed, which in practical terms means you are not smoking, you are not drinking alcohol, you are not even consuming red meats or very sugary or salty foods. You actually want to eat really bland and really soft. And imagine doing that for a very extended period of time. Also, you cannot be having children while you are in this training, which is why it's actually quite rare to even find female shamans, because it is a long training process and a lot on the body as well. And I think the female shamans that do decide to go on this experience show such an incredible resilience within their communities. So why do indigenous communities use ayahuasca? To heal. Sometimes they're physically feeling pain or have some sort of other disorder that they haven't been able to treat with other traditional plants around, and so then they resort to ayahuasca. Sometimes it's to diagnose. A patient may not be fully clear what's wrong with them, no one can figure it out, and so both the patient and the shaman master undergoing to ayahuasca to try to figure it out. And sometimes it's to acquire new knowledge. I have had also incredible anecdotes hearing from my friends in the jungle, where they tell me that while they're in the ayahuasca, they may have a physical sensation in their bodies, let's say in the nose or in the throats, and then they have the image or the smell of a specific plant appear to them, and almost they may refer to it as the plant is talking to me. And then the connection emerges from that as to perhaps let's explore that specific plant to treat for symptoms that are affecting my nose or my throat. And in a way, of course, I think in the westernized system knowledge, that may sound very out there and very just an abstract idea. For traditional knowledge, it is a very serious way of acquiring knowledge. It helps them to narrow down the focus. And if we think about it for a second, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of plants in the Amazon rainforests. How do we know where to go to find a medicine? Statistically, it is virtually impossible to just pick and choose and have the right combination of medicines to cure someone. Let me tell you about a really incredible lesson I learned early on from one of my friends that was training to be a shaman. He was close to ending his training. He was already 11 years deep. And I do remember at the time he had to slow down his training because it was really hard for him to access the community where his shaman master was, with the conditions of the river and the weather at the time. And so he was picking up some other jobs at the time to help out his family, including being a tour guide. And that is how I ended up meeting him. And he shared with me 3 specific lessons to keep in mind for whenever I decided to do ayahuasca, if I ever did. At that time, I had never tried ayahuasca yet. It was a few years ago. And he shared with me to keep 3 words in mind: calm, order, and control. And I will never forget that. And we really unpacked it in our conversation. And he meant calm because once you are under the effects of the ayahuasca, you may feel as if you have a lot of dreams and ideas and thoughts and even visions and imagery come to you. And it is relatively easy to feel overwhelmed by it. I think that anyone can relate to that. So the sensation and the remembering of feeling calm is priority because there's time for everything. 2, order. He did also explain how I may have different sounds and different images and different, almost like videos playing in my head, that just by virtue of feeling calm, I would not be allowed to access all the learnings I would be able to otherwise. And so that I needed to find a way to organize my thoughts and remember that I can order them in a way that it allows me to access each of them at my own time. So staying calm and keeping my thoughts and my visions organized. And 3rd, control. What is unique about ayahuasca is that you are in control of your physical body at all times. And I think that's a common misconception for most who have not grown up around indigenous upbringings or knowledge from the Amazon forests. Some people may think you consume ayahuasca and then you are completely out of it, when in reality, you are still in control of your body. And what he was saying is you have to remember and tell your own mind that your body is still in control. And he taught me to simply tap my fingers. He said, whenever you're starting to enter the experience and starting to feel a little overwhelmed, just tap your fingers, because it reminds you that you are the one in control of your body. If you wanted to slow down this experience, you can. Even if you wanted to pause it, per se, to use the toilet or to stand up for a minute or to go help someone in need for an emergency, you will be able to if you remember you're in control. And these lessons, I cannot express how helpful they have become to me for every time I have had an experience with ayahuasca, and of course outside of that too. 3 simple words: calm, order, control, that I think are very applicable to many aspects of our lives. Ayahuasca is composed of primarily 2 plants. We have Banisteriopsis capi, that is a vine that grows wild in the Amazon, and then we have Psychotria viridis. These 2 plants do not resemble one another. They actually don't even tend to grow near one another, which also poses the question as to how do people even first figure out that you needed to combine these 2 specific plants to get those precise effects that we get with ayahuasca? It's just mind-blowing to me, and we can dive into that another time. The vine, Banisteriopsis capi, contains MAO inhibitors, while the Psychotria viridis, these other plants, contains an active component known as DMT, dimethyltryptamine. DMT, dimethyltryptamine, that is known as the one generating the hallucinogenic effects that one enters with ayahuasca. What is interesting is that the components, these inhibitors from the vine, what they do is they slow down the digestion and breakdown of these DMT molecules, so that when it enters your body, it doesn't just immediately go out, but rather stays long enough for you to have the effect of it. For ayahuasca sessions, people refer to their experience and what they see as dreams, because it pretty much feels like one. Have you guys ever experienced lucid dreaming? It is a concept that you are very much asleep and you are having a very vivid and clear dream, but to some extent you can control it. You are still aware, and so not fully asleep. And so you literally have that mind power to control your dream. I have had it a few times where I am very aware that it is a lucid dream and I want to fly, and so I start to fly in my mind. People compare the ayahuasca experience to lucid dreaming, in a sense, because you're still in control of it. To consume ayahuasca, the shamans and the masters ask that you come in with a clean body. And that means for the days leading to you doing the session, maybe a week or 5 days, no alcohol, no smoking, no heavy oils, no salt, no sugar, just a very bland diet, so then your body is quote unquote as pure as it can come into the experience. I think also when we digest that scientifically, it also minimizes the amount of counter interactions that could be happening within your body as you're consuming these active components that are derived from the plant. So the shamans, they go look into the rainforest to find this vine and these other plants, and that is the very base of ayahuasca preparations. However, that is where the magic sauce or the secret of each master comes in. They many times will combine other things into the preparation depending on what the patient or their students are aiming or seeking for. So they may add a few other plants that only they are aware of, or even play with the combinations and quantities to be able to direct the results and the effects. And so that is why also people claim that you will have a different experience with different shamans. And a lot of that also derives by their wisdom of preparing different recipes for their ayahuasca. So what happens when you don't follow these suggestions to eat clean before? There was someone that was traveling with us once who ignored that and said, no, I want to eat ceviche, which is raw fish in Peru that we cook with lime juice. Up to an hour before the session, I'm fine. I have a strong stomach. This doesn't apply to me. I'll be okay. And so, the person just ate a lot of these things right before the session, and unfortunately they felt really, really sick during it, with really horrible vomiting, some diarrhea. It was just a very painful experience for them for about 2 hours in the toilet. And we also do remember them claiming during that process that they were seeing the devil, which sounds very scary. And I think it was this overwhelming sense of this overwhelming physical sense in the body that they were feeling so sick that the mind was just playing tricks on them in a way. Now, ayahuasca masters also say that when you end up vomiting is because your own body is cleansing itself. That is part of a purging system, and it is quite common when people are consuming ayahuasca. From my personal experience, I've actually never had any vomiting happen to me or the people that come with us that are following the preparation. Of course, we still see it happening to others, and I think it's just a reminder that do what you can, what is within your hands, to just come physically prepared to ensure you give yourself the best chance at this incredible ancestral and medicinal experience. In 2008, ayahuasca was declared the National Cultural Heritage of Peru, given the incredible role it plays in Amazonian traditional knowledge and wisdom. So let me tell you now about some of the notable experiences that I have had with ayahuasca. One of the first ones I remember was how vivid I could hear the entire jungle, as if someone just turned on the radio, and every single sound. I could have swear that I could hear the leaves being stepped on by animals and insects jumping between flowers and leaves, and you know uh, just such an in-depth sensorial experience, which many people do describe as well. What happened to me was that while I was in the process and really enjoying feeling as if I could have this much in-depth experience of the rainforest, everything stopped and it went quiet and silent. And it gave me such a sense of fear and like a heartbreak. Part of that, I think, comes from also knowing that if the rainforest ever goes quiet, you better run, because it is very likely that you have very big predators around you. So I wonder if part of that instinctual feeling that I got was just this ancestral knowledge of knowing that there's something really wrong if the rainforest goes quiet. I think also metaphorically, it also made me think about how we are destroying our forests, and how part of that leads to us not hearing our animals anymore. In a recent trip, I even had a member of a community tell me how they used to wake up to the sounds of birds, and now they wake up to the sounds of machinery removing gold and silver from their territories. So I think that deep sense of fear reflected so much of both minds that I have at all times, this Western analytical thinking, but also this very indigenous ancestry that I carry with me. And at some point within that experience, it was almost as if I was being taught that there was no need for me to stay in that feeling of despair. I just needed to remember that I could tap into the rainforest at any time. And suddenly, when in that dream, I had that realization, all the sounds came alive again, and a sense of calmness and peace returned to my body. And I think I also interpreted that in the sense that if we do everything we can to save our rainforest now, we'll be protecting these sounds that carry life, that mean life themselves. I think it also, I took it as a lesson that in moments where I may personally feel so disconnected and unplugged from nature and from a sense of self that comes with nature, because we are an extension of nature, that all I needed was to remember that we are not disconnected, and that I could tap back into that sense of belonging. And those are lessons that became so important to me over the next years, especially as we navigated the pandemic and I was far from home. Another really insane experience I had with ayahuasca is one that to this day blows my mind, because it led me to such a rabbit hole of research that literally changed how I think about science, how I think about animals, how I view our natural world, how I question even how our knowledge came to be as humans. And it has really propelled even incredible collaborations that are happening now. So in this other experience, I was laying down and I was very aware that where I was physically, when I suddenly felt my face changing. And I have no other way to describe that except saying I felt as if my nose was shifting shape, as if it was getting bigger and elongated and almost kind of like flat, so elongated sideways. I felt as if my body was moving in a different way, and suddenly it's as if I entered this, let's say, like a video game where I was walking moving my limbs in a very different way and being very aware of my muscles and my bones. And suddenly a tail appeared, and I could basically see what my body had become. And I could see sleek black fur, and I saw below and I could see paws, and I moved around and became really aware that I saw everything and sensed everything around me with my nose first. I had become a black jaguar. Now, black jaguars and the spotted jaguar that we're used to seeing in photos, they're actually the same species, Panthera onca. The black jaguars just happen to have a condition that leads to their fur appear black. When you look at them closely, you also see still the same spots. They just, of course, are not visible from a distance. In the dream, I quickly realized I was trekking through the rainforest, and I knew what direction water sources were at because I could smell the senses that were being carried by the wind from the water and the wildlife that was within that water. I could tell where other predators may be, where my next hunt would be, and I could tell whether it was going to rain or not, how fresh or even safe a space may feel based on what animals were there before, or even potentially humans. And in this dream, that is how I began to explore the rainforest. But it was not a senseless just lollygagging through the forest. I had a mission, and my mission was that I had left my cubs at home, and they were not too far. That's what I knew in the dream. And they were injured. And so, what the dream's mission was, it was for me to find a new place where to raise my cubs, a place where they would be safe, where they would have access to water and food, and also potentially medicine. And so, as I am navigating, I eventually found this one place where a tree had naturally fell, and so it had kind of created this refuge place. I knew I was really far away from any human activity. I couldn't sense anything else that was non-animal, and I have found what I thought was the perfect spot, especially when at some point I turned around and I could smell and see these tiny yellow flowers that I, by virtue of the smell and this kind of chemical communication that I could not explain, only feel and know, I knew that those were going to be great medicines to help heal my cups. And I came from that experience with so many questions and such so much curiosity, because one, is it possible that jaguars can smell medicine in their flowers? That was, of course, my very first question. And it just opened up my mind as to, is there a way of communicating in the natural world that we have paid no attention to, because we as humans cannot understand it? And if we cannot understand something, I think it's part of the human ego to feel afraid to explore it or even acknowledge it. And it led me to read and dive deep into an area of science that is known as Zoopharmacognosy. It is the study of how animals medicate in the wild. If you have ever seen your dog or your cat eat grass, my dog does it, they do so to purge themselves. It's almost like they know what grass to consume to help their tummies. It is this idea, but applied into the wild, natural world. And it makes so much sense if we think about it. That there is this secret chemical communication that the plants and flowers and trees are releasing these molecules that are volatiles and that are basically kind of going into the air. And the idea that animals have incredible senses, like for example, of course, dogs can sense so many more smells that we as humans could even envision. And that perhaps with that, that's how they have just evolved to know which ones are going to be more beneficial and which ones are going to be harmful. It also led me to imagine, could it have been that by observing animals, people early on in the Amazon were curious to test specific plants for different medicinal purposes? Because when we really stop down for a minute, how in heaven did our early ancestors know what plant to go to get the effects from ayahuasca, to communicate with this out of the realm world? How did they know that not only was it gonna be divine, but that you needed this other complementary plant for them to have that such precise, beautiful effects? Like I said, the two plants that are used as the base of ayahuasca do not grow near each other. So it's not even, oh, I'm going to start with this one because somebody tested it and they saw some effects and I'm going to try what's around it. They don't even look like one another to say that perhaps they were looking for something that looked similar. So there are some stories we have heard where some community members share that they have seen jaguars consume ayahuasca. That is to be defined, to be investigated further, see if we can find, quantifiable evidence. And if that is true, could it have been that by observing one of the most powerful guardians, the jaguar of the Amazon, could have inspired people to go and explore that same plant? So with Western knowledge and research, we know that ayahuasca activates different neuroplasticity mechanisms within our brain. With the indigenous ancestral knowledge and traditions of our planet, we know it allows us to enter this psychospiritual realm that many are really trying to understand. Yet I think our ancestors have navigated it in deep ways for a long time. So I think it begs the question, how do we connect the mind and the body with the natural worlds outside of observation and our five senses? Could there be something that we just don't quite fully understand? Could it be that there is more of a connection on how animals interact with the plant world that would have inspired us humans to explore new medicines? So that's the end of this story of how in an ayahuasca dream I became a black jaguar. Stay tuned for our next conversation soon.